What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Empowered Athlete Podcast. It's your host, Natty Boss. And today we have a repeat guest, my friend Connor. He's been killing it on Instagram lately and just with his business. And I really just wanted to take the time to extract one of the principles that we talked about in one of our first episodes, which was our episode 9 in 2022. So go check that one out. You'll get to know a little bit more about him and just the overall concepts of what he teaches and integrates with his work. But today we're going to dive specifically into the importance of rotational training for athletes, because having worked one-on-one with Connor and integrating that in addition to just general movement education has been an absolute game changer. And I've seen personally lots of progress performance-wise on the mats in the dojo and in competition and at the highest levels. So, and he works with very, very high level athletes of multiple disciplines. So I'm really excited to have him back on here. He's based in Philly at the moment, and he has a bachelor's degree as well as an MBA. And he comes from an extensive background in sports and fitness, and he reconstructed his own body over time to create what he currently teaches. I really believe that Connor is a true embodiment of what he teaches, which is why I'm having him on here again, because I really believe that you can only really teach things that you've truly embodied, because that wisdom just lands so much deeper, and you can tell when there's, a fraud, and he's not a fraud. So he has a lot of knowledge and wisdom to share. And so we're going to dive into it in the form of rotational training. He also leads a team of trainers in his company whose mission it is to help people create change by loving themselves. And he believes that success begins with access, awareness, and ownership in all phases of life. And you guys know that I'm on board with that motto and mission as well. And he teaches these principles through movement. So without further ado, what's up? Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nat. That was such a sweet intro. Excellent, expert style right there. And what's going on, everybody? Really happy to be on here again. Nat is a fantastic, first we'll start from a student. Nat is avid and crafty about how she approaches her sport. That is how her and I got to know one another. People don't seek me by accident, right? There's a purpose. All right. So first off, you guys are in great hands if you're listening and working with anything that Nat's got her hands on. Second off, I am Conor Millstein. As Nat had told you, I'm a movement education specialist is what I call myself, because frankly, there's not many names for it, right? And we're here today to talk to you a little bit about the rotational training aspect of IsoMovementSystems. All right, and I can't wait. Nat's got some awesome questions. So Nat, please take the floor, let it rip, and I'm happy to answer everything for you.
Absolutely. So, let's start with the basics of, for those who have no idea, what exactly is rotational training, and are there specific elements of rotational training?
Totally. That's a great question, Nat. And I'm going to send a question right back at you just so we help people get a little perspective here. And when we delineate, right, if we're saying rotational training, well, what is regular training, right? What is regular training? Regular training, another way of saying that, would be considered maybe a little more linear, right? Because everyone has a different idea of what's new and what's old and so on and so forth, depending on where they've kind of jumped into their training routine and what they've seen in their lives, right? So regular or traditional training, we're talking things like all the way back from your bodybuilder, Arnold Schwarzenegger, body part split. That's where most people would have started with their training. And then all the way into, around, we'll say the 80s, 90s, where aerobic level training became extremely popular, where a lot of HIIT style classes today got their start. And then 2003 comes around, we have collegiate or strength training, really, right? College sports is really where we start to see that get popular, and what we now know today as lift, right? Your traditional lift, your bench, your squat, your clean, and all the auxiliary explosive pieces that have kind of branched off of that in the last 20 years, right? So that takes us all the way to this new form of training that Nat said is rotational. That is the word that it's been given. But ultimately, if traditional training is linear, rotational training is called angular, or it's more complete, right? When you train in rotation, what you do is you encourage or you consider more dimensions of movement at the same time, right? So most people know, if they have a traditional background, that there are three planes that we move in: frontal, sagittal, and then transverse. Right? In this rotational idea, rotation doesn't begin until all three planes are being hit simultaneously. Or just put it simply, Nat's moving in 3D, right? The cool part is that when we move in 3D, a whole new set of capabilities pops out, right? And we could get super nerdy at this point and kind of take on our own tangent of going into like the basically quantum conversation and how particles operate when you observe them versus when you're not looking at them, how they literally change characteristics like magic. And it's the same exact idea in rotational training. There's things that are happening under the hood that we can't see with our eyes. So but you can certainly feel it, as Nat could attest to, as Nat will certainly be able to attest to. It's hard to see, but you know it's there.
Yeah.
Right. So rotational training is about what happens after all three planes are active together, working together as a unit, and those new capabilities are on the table. Right? That's what rotational training is all about. The other key component of rotational training is, what are we training? It's really centered around human biology and the human gait cycle, walking on our 2 feet, being bipedal, right? The spine in the human body, in a vertebrate body, the spine is the main motor of movement. In most traditional training programs, the legs are considered the main driver of movement, right? So there's that large delineation as well. And then, of course, we have just simple anatomy consideration. Rotational training is going to look first at a whole system and then at the parts of the system, right? Versus having a isolated split of focuses where I'm getting chest and tris one day, back and bis another day, or a push day and a pull day, or whatever the isolation is, whatever the phases are. Instead, we consider the whole the majority of the time, and those tiny pieces become tools to ensure the whole is operating as it should. All right. That the concept, the word there that a lot of people will want to look up is tensegrity, right? Or the body, how it actually holds itself, which is by a combination or balance of pressure and tension in our tissues versus our bones, right? That word comes from Thomas Myers' Anatomy Trains. Very worth a Google. And lastly, I would say, to define rotational training, you have to talk about multidimensional integrative qualities and the carryover into our day-to-day, where you're dealing with 3 dimensions of stress all the time, whether you like it or not. That's just called living on this planet. So it would probably be smart to have your training incorporate those 3 dimensions all the time that you have to deal with anyway. Otherwise, you're only getting strong in one of those 3 dimensions. Well, why would we do that when we could get strong in all of those dimensions at all times?
Yes.
All right. So there's just that simple integrative or complete quality. So that's how those 3 bullet points is really how I would try and consider rotational training.
I love that. When you say that when one focuses on one of those planes and kind of puts all their buckets in that area, essentially and ultimately, that's what leads to the imbalances and the injuries and things like that.
100%. Because the nervous system, if you continually teach it, there's this one plane, it's going to get conditioned to the idea of it being on one plane. And then the natural laws of physiology take over, and it specializes and forms to exist in that plane. Yes. So just to make fun of myself, I always prefer to use myself. I was a big lifter, CrossFitter, power lifter, so on and so forth. And my butt was really tiny or flat, right? And my quads were really thick, really big. And I didn't have a lot of shape to my body, right? Because my body formed to be capable in one plane. It doesn't need to shape or tone or be complete and full. But yes, exactly correct.
Love that. So let's dive into the specifics of why rotational training is important for athletic performance. and what are the
Mhm.
specific benefits? I guess this would be like more examples and such to really ground in those concepts that you just shared.
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing that happens when you work through those concepts, those principles, is the first thing you're going to notice is your longevity, how much lighter you feel, right? So if 100 reps costed you 100 energy points, right? Now 100 reps cost you one energy point, like
Yeah.
we were just talking about. There's the
Yeah.
simple longevity of it,
Yeah.
right? When you move or get good at moving in 3 dimensions, get good at rotating, you're creating a body that it's existing with decompressive joints or hydrated joints, and then tissues that aren't too stretched, aren't too tight, aren't too dry, right, are in the perfect relationship. And the balance of that is what I call an anti-inflammatory environment. It's very hard for your tissues to inflame when they're being fed the right things, pulled the right ways, and live at the right length.
Yeah.
All right, so longevity is the number one key that you get away from rotational training. I would say the second most important thing is the carryover. Just because you're using all of those dimensions all of the time, as a human, it doesn't matter where we put you, right? You're still a human. You're still human Nat jiu-jitsu artist, human Nat judo artist, human Nat mom, human Nat working out. It doesn't matter. The motor is the motor. It's just going into different cars, right? So if we focus your training around the human ability, not the judo, not the jujitsu, but the human doing it, you're getting better at everything at the same time.
Mm.
And it carries over a lot faster because you're seeing angles and you're getting strength. You're getting strength in transition, in rotation, in transition. And most of sports are played in transition, right?
Yes. Yes.
I played football, for example, right? And I got really strong at benching, squatting, deadlifting, and a couple different lifts, right? But that position and that lift were only mere moments, right? It was like this many seconds of a game, I found myself in a perfect situation to use those skills,
Yes.
right? When you get strong in transition, you're going to be able to seek transition all the time, awkward spots, tough spots to be in, tight angles, right? That carryover is so crucial for athletic performance. And then
Um,
there's just the volume.
right.
Oh
I
yeah,
want to pause you right there just
please.
because uh,
Yeah, you like that one?
it's just ever since learning this through you and doing it one on one, like I feel like I want to scream on top of the mountaintops about like the phrase strength in transition.
Mm-hmm.
That has been
Mm-hmm.
the absolute game changer for me, guys. Like
Yes.
that's actually I think exactly what I was as you were speaking, I was like, what I don't know how to describe how I feel aside
Mm-hmm.
from floating.
Yep.
Um like I really feel that buoyancy, that floating while and knowing exactly like when to move and put pressure and all that stuff. But it's almost like just my center axis, no matter where I'm moving, what my center point, my spine essentially, it's being able to shift that alongside my limbs at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And essentially what that is transition. So
Mm-hmm.
like I knew that, but I didn't like really put it together until you
Yeah.
said that strength and transition. I'm like, that is where my superpower has been. And I've always kind of been pretty good at that because I've always been athletic, but understanding the language and having the education and then actually applying those principles through my training, that has just sharpened like
Totally.
immensely. And just to let the listeners know, like, and we were talking about this right before we kind of started the episode, was that I'm doing this at the highest level at 7 months pregnant, like with not a sweat, not a bead of sweat. And I'm just moving and I'm not even gassed out. And these people that I'm training against, they are not in the same position as me as far as being pregnant. And, I can see that their physical body is struggling. I can see that there's a disconnect between like what
Labor,
their mind wants
laboring,
to do. Yes.
laboring. They're
Yes,
laboring,
like
right?
their mind wants to do something, but I can see their body has that lag time.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like with me, it's like the sharpness and the precision that I've been able to
Exactly.
feel and execute is like it definitely feels like it's harmonious and like in unison.
Yep. Exactly. There's not, it's funny because there's not a lot of language around this, right? Our language, English language, is built around the linear or traditional understanding of exercise and movement. Remember that I'm a jock that went to school later. I learned how to learn later because I physically could no longer play my sport, right?
Yeah.
So I got competitive towards learning.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest parts that I didn't mention on that list yet of why learning rotational training for athletes is just updating your language, literally updating your software, right? You can
Oh my God,
consider
that's
and
so
get,
important.
you can cover so much more ground than you think. We don't realize what we're limited by. Something like language, we don't even think about that.
100%. Just having the language to certain things like the
Mm-hmm.
rotational, like the coiling, like that is
Mm-hmm.
something I'm constantly thinking about when I'm doing my movements and just having the language around it. Like I have the physical exercise practice as well, but the language is really what clicked everything of like, okay, now my like brain can
Mm-hmm.
understand what we're experiencing. And now there can be more of that unison of that mind
Exactly.
body.
And we cut that lag time. And then you have your physical practice on top of that, and you cut that lag time of learning by so much. You could have your white belts moving fluidly as if they were purple, brown, that you usually don't see till purple level,
Yeah.
right? Like me, I'm terrible at jujitsu because I don't practice jujitsu. But if you watch me move through the jujitsu movements, it's
Yeah.
not fun to roll with me. It doesn't matter what belt you are. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter because I'm capable of making it very difficult for you, right? Just because of how I'm holding myself,
Exactly.
right? But if I go to execute a technique, sure, I'll miss the technique, and you'll point that out in a second because
Yeah.
you'll realize, oh, he doesn't actually have the ability to finish these. It just feels like
Yeah.
I'm rolling against someone better.
Yes, yes, yes. I just wanted to
Exactly correct.
like highlight that because that transition, like before I was always like a position before submission, and that was something
Mm-hmm.
that I like really talked about and still believe in. But like when I learned the language, what I realized I was like, oh no, 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 no. It's transition before position, before submission. Transition is the first step. And that's
Exactly.
really where everything started to click and skyrocket. So I know I interrupted you. So we can
No,
get back to whatever
that
else you want to point out as far as those elements for athletic performance specifically.
That was awesome. No, it's really cool of you to point out where things hit home because like you just said, this is new. It took us a long time, you and I, to develop this language and communication, and us working through it is definitely helpful for the listeners and watchers to understand quicker and because this is brand new stuff, right?
Yeah.
So another reason why rotational training would be beneficial for athletes is the volume of results, right? Where most people that are doing more traditional training methods, if they lift to get strong, they stretch to get flexible, they massage and mobilize to get mobile, they do cardio to get cardio, right? Abs to get abs. And in doing so, you're losing tons of time, right? So as I was developing this program, I was like, how am I going to work as hard as I want to work and do all that? It's not possible,
Yeah.
right? So part of what's so cool about rotational training is it handles all those results at the same time. I
Mhm.
don't need to go stretch. I don't need to do mobility. I don't need to do strength work, and I don't need to do cardio. I do one thing that handles all of those things.
Yeah.
I'm saving myself. I'm someone, granted, not everyone's going to want this. Not everyone wants to work like I do in a day. I like to overwork. So I'm an overachiever through and through.
Mhm.
So for me to free up that time is invaluable. And frankly, who wants to be in the gym that long? Not that many people, right?
Mhm.
Especially, maybe not 2 kids ago, right? You can spend all day in a gym. Now that's not even a possibility. It's not even a
Yeah.
possibility, right?
100%.
So
I
you
think
need to
people need to
be.
hear that, and athletes need to hear that because one of the biggest complaints and like issues or struggles that athletes come to me with, one of them is like that idea of struggling with time management
Mhm.
because they have all these goals, they want to get stronger, they want to get more explosive. And then again, if they have that mindset of that traditional way of doing things, yes, the requirement would be spending 4 or 5 hours in the gym. If you
So
have
much.
3 kids and a full-time job, yes, that's also not realistic. And so you set yourself up for that disappointment because you're like, well, I guess I need to just, ditch my goals. And it's like, no, it's about working smarter, not harder, being more efficient in movement. And something that I know that you will agree with, because I believe that time management is the byproduct of working more efficiently, but what is actually precedes that ability to have more time, in my opinion, is the energy management aspect. And I know that's something that you talk about because
Huge.
everything that you work with in this regard is about the optimal energy usage and not
Usage, yeah.
more than you have to. So it's really about energy management through efficient movement, which gives you time freedom.
Exactly. You open up time. Exactly. All right, that's something I only glanced over. You're right. That was from our first podcast. The going back to that first point of why rotational training is important, and I went into longevity. Right, I kind of smushed it all to efficiency back in there because if it's a matter of time, right? Time management, energy management, and we all know if you're an athlete, right? If you're chasing a goal, you don't even have to be an athlete. If you're chasing a goal, there's only three real tough parts that you need to manage: consistency, effort, and then staying in the game, not getting hurt, right? There's only three things. You're going to reach that goal with that combination, no matter what, right? And most people are there pushing themselves, pushing, and they're giving away, they're spending energy, spending, and thinking in their heads that that's what's going to get them there, and they just need to be tough enough to push,
Yes.
right?
Oh
Which
my
that's
God.
just not humanly possible. Part of the longevity practice is being able to do it the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. Because if you can't stack up all those days, you're never going to have enough reps to get to that high end goal anyway.
Mhm.
Right. So it's all, I tie that into the longevity of it all. All right. You reduce your injury risk because you're moving better and more cleanly. And you've now made more efficient use of your time.
Yes, yes, yes. Love that. So let's dive into basically how you would recommend athletes integrate rotational training into their routines. We obviously
Mhm.
talked about basically, this idea of scratch everything you've been doing and integrate this. But for those, maybe I know that a big piece for Inside Out is, the mental shift as well. That I think a big fear that will come up for athletes is like, but like, will it work? Is it actually possible to like do 30 minutes, instead of the 2 hours and like actually see the results? I think there's that mental component, but how can they also tangibly start integrating it into their training in a way that feels like safe and doable for their mind? Because their
Mhm.
mind is going to resist that initial change. And you're very clear about that when you're working with like clients or group work. You're like, your mind is going to want, like, I had that, like, full disclosure. I had that when you were teaching me like adjustments to push-ups. Like I could just feel my ego at first. I'm more committed to learning than anything else. So it's usually easy for me to shift my ego, but I still notice the ego present to be like, but this is always how we did push-ups. And this is how we've taught it for years. And this kind of like, oh my gosh, like it can't be this way. And then just feeling and then letting my body give me the truth through the adjustments of feeling. I'm like, but this feels good. And
Exactly.
and that was something that I noticed, like mentally I had to say, like, you either have to choose the old way or commit to choosing the new way and then adjust.
Well, always the way that performs the way you want it to. Always the way you that performs that the way you want it to in the end. Meaning,
Yeah.
it's just about being honest, which is the biggest part. And we are never rewarded for that necessarily, right? The reward was, oh, Nat, good push up because you did it by what the book said to do, right? It was
Or
never,
like
oh,
how many push-ups,
or how
right?
many,
Or just
right?
doing like how many.
How deep of a range of motion? Were you using your hands or your knuckles, right? Little things that never address the motor of the movement. They skip
Yeah.
the point. They skip over the point. Nat, did that push up make you better at everything else you do? Right?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
That's the result we're looking for. Right? Great. Your pec gets a little stronger, your tricep and shoulder gets great, but did it make you better at what you say you want to do? And that getting right with that stings a little at first because you
Yeah.
start to realize the areas where you're telling yourself that you're doing well that really aren't benefiting you in the ways that you want them to.
Yeah.
And that hurts. That hurts totally. And that's a huge part of that, right? Now I believe you went through 2 training blocks, 6 months of work.
Yeah.
And the first training block I call the unlearning phase, right? That whole first quarter, you're just unlearning. It's with my athletes, especially people who have a lot of reps and a lot of coaching. They've been coached through a lot. They pushed through a lot. You got a lot of unlearning to do. A lot of unlearning to do. And I had some of the most. I had some of the most. I started working, both my parents worked in fitness. I was working out since I was like 9, 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
I had a lot of unlearning to do.
Yeah.
But through that repetition, it became easy to see where I was in my own way, and it doesn't sting. The sting of it goes away. You still find ways to be your own problem, of course, but you get sharper at getting out of your own way sooner.
Yeah.
And that's talking about, this is a part that Nat clearly connected with deeply. This is a big feature of the one-on-one work for sure, because we can get to know each other closely, intimately, and no one else is around to judge you. That's a huge part of it. It's just an unbiased point of view, and then you and your goal, right? And all I do is make sure you are directly looking at your goal, and what we're doing is getting you there in the best fashion we can in every way. And a great, that was really fun that you brought that up, Matt. I love when people are willing to use themselves as examples. It gives so much more perspective. Because my first answer to her question was, it depends on the athlete's current standing. You're exactly correct. How would you recommend athletes integrate this? Well, it's not just drop everything and switch. It depends entirely on where you are.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to rock the boat too much. It's not about rocking your ego or throwing your world into a backspin, right? It's not about that, because that's too much chaos too. No one wants that much chaos. We want a smooth shift, right? So a huge part in creating that smooth shift is the first question to the athlete is, are you in any pain? All right, that's always the first question, because most athletes are, most people are, frankly, right? But as an athlete, you get taught not to show it or think about it, or nothing, whatever, tough it out, right? That's the background I came from. Now, it led to a train wreck, right? Absolute train wreck in my body. So I was like, okay, it's not that I'm not tough. I just needed to do something about this stuff sooner. And that would have been the tougher thing to do in the end.
Yeah. I tell people that all the time. It's actually the discipline of knowing when you need to stop and pause for a moment is actually part of being tough. But people see it as a weakness. And like, your ability to not be able to stop is actually a weakness in my eyes.
Exactly.
It's just have that self-control.
It's a sign of immaturity, or just where they are in their own development. And which and I would never knock somebody. I was there, right? You were there.
Yeah.
I would never knock somebody for where they are in their development. But I have processes put in place to help people position themselves on how to answer that question. How do we integrate this into your routine, right? Yeah. So the first one is, are you in pain? Because that one is objective and clear. And when people are, unfortunately, this is a very harsh reality of my job, the only times people pay close enough attention to what they're doing is when they're hurt. It's the only time, right? And that sucks. Me too. That includes me. But that's just a rough reality. So if you're listening to this, that means that's your sign. That's what I'm saying. And then the next questions are, what is the level of your goals? So pro level versus amateur level. And then that kind of helps me identify if they control their schedule, or if what we're dealing with constraints wise. Yeah. And then there's their movement assessment. So how are you moving as a human, not as a jiu-jitsu artist, not as a judo artist, right? I want to see how you're moving as a human, because that is ultimately present in all of those places, like we had discussed before. So if you move well as a human, you're going to have a much bigger head start in what we're trying to accomplish here. And that helps us control where we begin with your program. Yes. All right. So any way you cut it up, this is how I kind of draw it up for my pro level athletes. We'll start with the pro level athletes, where if you are competing at jujitsu, you have to call yourself a pro level athlete, because that's the requirement on your body, unless you don't care about how you place, in which case that's fine. Um, that's just the delineation between pro level and not. If you're going to judge yourself by how you place, that's pro level. And where we start is by learning the essentials of movement, right? So because I built the mental emotional components into this, Nat, I know those lessons are going to come up. So I start the physical process and I let those pieces unfold. That's why the one-on-one work is the most effective method, because it's perfectly set up
Yeah.
to accomplish we're working at the emotional, mental, and physical level immediately right off the bat. And the more group style work, we still get there. It's just a little slower pace, not as customized, not as individualized. So the athlete will openly call the essentials their recovery work. That's how they'll feel about it at first, because they don't want to feel soft. They don't want to feel like they're not tough. They don't want to feel weird, ostracized, right? Ultimately. So when they're learning their essentials, we decompress their joints. We begin to learn how to leverage gravity to our advantage instead of it aging us or it leveraging us. And about a week, maybe 10 days into that practice, the athlete starts to realize, wow, I feel good, right? And I haven't done that much, to be honest, right? It's just recovery work, but I feel better than when I'm doing all the other work. How could that be? And as soon as we open that door in the brain, well, we begin to eliminate old habits that don't serve, right? So it's just a simple question at that point. Hey, do you feel better doing this or this? Okay, so what do you want to spend your time doing? This. It becomes a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It becomes a no-brainer. And by doing it that thorough, not saying stop everything you're doing and start this, by
Yeah.
letting you weave it, it lets you have ownership in the decision. I'm not forcing anything down your throat. So it starts by letting the athlete have control. All right. And we start with the essentials. Once they get the essentials down, we talk about their what's called the foundations of athleticism. We begin to rotate. All right, this is where we build power, speed, change of direction ability, symmetry, rotational level mobility or integrative mobility, integrative flexibility, integrative strength, so on and so forth. All right, and at that point, they're working out harder than they ever have in their lives, in less time than they ever have in their lives, with less weight loads than they ever have in their lives, and they feel the best they ever have in their lives.
I can attest.
Right. So by the time you get to that point, you're sold. Right. I don't need to tell you anything. I don't start anything with the athlete. They're wondering how they can do more of this more often, how they can feel that good more often, how they can get more carryover more often. All right. And at which point we begin to condition that motor towards the activity that they want to compete at or be good at. Right. Human Nat knows their essentials, knows how to rotate, can now move into jujitsu, right? That's the way you want to orient everything. So we have human Nat performing jujitsu. So your jujitsu doesn't take away from your longevity.
Yeah.
And that point, they're existing together.
Yeah.
All right. So that's how you get an athlete started. And it takes in one-on-one work 3 to 9 months is the time frame I give people. In group work, we're calling it 9 to 12 months.
Okay. Love that. Love that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's just
you're gonna enjoy the new services. That's gonna once you feel what you can feel like and you realize what the world can feel like, it's very exciting when when people are on the way. Nat is gonna love these new services rolling out.
yes, yes. And I felt pretty good before we started working together, but
Mm-hmm.
again, it's like I felt even better.
Yeah, we had one. Nat felt great. Right. If you ask any athlete, they feel great when we start. Nat felt great. We had one area. I got lucky. She happened to have a strain in her neck when we had started. I got really
Yeah.
lucky, which I was able to harp on as an entry point,
Yeah.
and that's what helped Nat to open herself up mentally and emotionally a little quicker, and that
Yeah.
was that was awesome.
Yeah, one of the things like so the rotational training and all those elements were just like spot on perfect. But I think or I know that with the essentials being the first step, the biggest thing for me was having that awareness and that reflection of where my cervical spine was kind of in relation to the rest of my spine, how I had my, for those watching this on YouTube, kind of had my chin kind of just more sticking out, and how that kind of showing the anatomy of how that influences everything else, and just keeping that like T-spine extension and sucking my
Relaxing your jaw
chin
back.
down, and just like that's just a normal way of being for me now, like as far as just again like you said, waking up, standing up, making coffee, like navigating my normal life. And because I've had that practice and it's like recalibrated to that, uh, use your word,
Exactly correct. Exactly
but
correct.
it is, it's recalibrated to that, so
Every day.
it's
Right.
natural that like I don't fall out of habit when I go to jiu-jitsu, because what I'm doing in my everyday life is now just translating when I'm on the mat, and I'm staying in that same posture where I have a higher risk of potential injury because of the sport that I'm doing, but keeping those essential cues and then adding the rotation, like
Yep,
just really,
you layered it beautifully.
yeah.
And remember, guys, Nat drills it's totally possible to permanently rearrange your skeleton, like Nat's talking about, where she doesn't really have to think about it anymore. It's just automatic. It takes a lot of work to get there, just so you know. Nat works hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's so worth it, guys.
Yeah.
So I know that we actually touched on this, but I guess my question around this was more for, I guess it could be in a perfect world, or maybe just you can share some of like the professional athletes that you do work with, like if this is like their primary type of quote unquote cross
Yep.
training with their discipline, or do they still integrate levels of weight training? Like I guess my question is more along the lines of those who just like really like weight training and like the
Yep.
strength training, and like is there a place, I know you had some reels about like fixing, you know, Bulgarian split squats and deadlifts and things like that. Like, is there still a place for that for people who just really want it, or would you really in a perfect world just say mix it all together, like because of just the benefits that we've discussed so far of just how the crossover happens and just the compounding effects of doing this type of work versus it, like is it still worth keeping that at all?
That's the golden question. So the world, right? The media world wants a nice polarizing sound bit, right? They want the answer to be something simple. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that, right? That's kind of the world we live in anymore. And if we want to keep it in the world we live in, which I'm getting a lot more comfortable with, the answer would be no. There's no space for traditional weight training when there is something better to do, right? But my personal answer as a coach is always do what led to the right result, do what led to the win, but be willing to evolve it. Otherwise, your opponents might, right?
I just got chills.
It's going to be the most adaptable that stays on top, right? Not the one that does the one thing the best. How often is the strongest person in the room the best athlete in the room? Almost never. I would actually venture to say never. Right? I was the strongest person in the room, most rooms I was in growing up. And I was never close to the best athlete. Right. So that's speaking from experience. The reality is there's moving is better than not moving, right? For the most part. For the most part. I'd rather you move and make mistakes because at least you're taking reps and you're gaining experience.
Yeah.
All right. Those physical reps can be undone later. Those physical reps can be undone. Right. So people ask me all the time if I regret my decade plus of traditional weight training. They ask all the time. And the answer is no, I don't regret it. Right. Do I think about what could have been if I had been smarter with my body sooner? Of course I do. Of course I do. But that doesn't define who I am at all.
Yeah.
If anything, I've used it as a tool to help myself and a lot more people get into a much stronger place, just like explaining this answer right here, as opposed to just going with the one that gets me all the attention, right? The polarizing answer.
Yeah.
There is little bits of room. So here, to put it simply, a Bulgarian split squat, right? One I know you love, right? I know why you love it, because it burns a lot. I know what you like of it. You're crazy like that. I understand.
Yeah.
Right? I understand. I get it. I've done plenty of them. It's
I
very
diagnose
heavy weights.
pain.
Exactly. And you've been taught to associate that pain with a positive result,
Yes.
right? Because maybe in jujitsu, you know that if you roll 6, 12-minute rounds a day, you're going to get pretty conditioned, right? That's painful. Now, they're not the same pain. So that's the difference there.
Yeah.
The reality is that Bulgarian, you choose how many reps you do, you choose how much weight you lift, if any. You choose where your back foot's positioned. You choose where your front foot's positioned. You choose the temperature that the room is in. You choose the song that's on your headphones. You choose the shoes that are on your feet. You have choices, right? When we're rolling 6, 12-minute rounds, you don't choose any of those things. You might be able to choose the music and the temperature. That's about it, right? You don't control any of those things. The pain that you feel in real life contexts, the struggle of real work, and the struggle of prescribed work, chosen work, will never equate. They will never equate. And the reality was, you could get as strong as you want and as many lifts as you want. That doesn't mean that that is going to show up for you in any way. It doesn't mean it's going to make you healthier and able to live a longer life. And it doesn't mean it's going to make you better at your sport. It means that if that instance happens to occur in your real life, your sport daily habits, you will be able to lift more weight in that instance. So if 24 hours a day happen, maybe 3% of your day you've been stronger in now. Right. And if you can accept that, then yes, go crazy and do your traditional, right? That go crazy. It's a deeper issue. What you're really telling me is you don't think your time matters that much. Right? That's what you're really telling me. That Conor, I don't care. I'm going to spend time getting this much benefit instead of that much benefit. Well, you just told me a lot about yourself, really. It's not about the choice so much as the person, right? That person just told me that I'm willing to waste time, even though I know better. Right? That is
plan, guys, because that's going to be a hard
that is the core issue here, right?
Yes.
That is what's really the problem at hand. Again, if you're going to say, I'm going to sit on the couch and eat potato chips, or I'm going to do Bulgarian split squats, go move, right? Leave the chips be, go move, right? Go, not even close, no question. But if you're going to tell me, I'm going to have an hour a day in my life to work out, an hour a day is what I got, and I'm going to actively choose to do something that doesn't yield as big of a result as the next thing, then you're just lazy, stupid, or ignorant, right? And I'm not okay with, right? It's not the traditional lift that I'm not okay with. It's the laziness, the stupidity, and the ignorance, right? That's the problem. It's the lack of, it kills me that someone would not think that they're important. I want you to have free time. What you can probably create some brilliant things with some free time. A free nat means that I get to learn jujitsu. That's great for me, right? I want Nat to be free.
With all my free time, I've been crocheting like 50 billion things.
Right. She's pregnant,
I'm
people.
almost on my fruit basket.
That was cracking me up. Thinking of you having the patience to sit and knit was making me laugh. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, wow, she must be bored because she's really in this.
No, I just really have been able to recalibrate things, and my nervous system is way more regulated and balanced. So now
I
I
have to agree.
have a bigger capacity to, and you know what? I will say, I do it while I'm cycling. So, so I have
didn't
to
realize that.
admit that in there.
I didn't realize that. That's very funny. That's very nat of you. Right. So yeah, that was a long-winded answer for the traditional weight training versus rotational training.
No, I
Right.
love that. I think that
We
was the
have
perfect answer.
we have the sound bit answer in there, but we also have the reality of it. So do
And I
with it
love
what
that. I think as a coach, that was the perfect answer to give. And I think just really highlighting that last point was really what people needed to hear. It's, I just loved that. I don't know the exact language that you just said exactly stated it in, but basically the along the lines of like, if you know better, do better. And if you don't choose to do better, like that's just the internal
That's
issue that you really need
exactly.
to work through.
Exactly.
And that like just hits home for me just because I'm just not that kind of person. I know you're not that kind of person. It's like once you know that there is something better out there, it's like you're going to go chase that.
Exactly.
The yield is so much greater. And whatever your ego said about the past, it's like, screw that. This is so much, like, this is worth it to me. It outweighs the old way because of the yield,
Yep.
so it's worth
Yep.
going.
Yep.
So with
It's
that
right.
said,
It's undeniable, right?
yeah,
Once you see the profit come in from one thing versus the profit come in from another, you have a choice to make. And I don't care ever what choice people make. It's
yeah,
about agreeing, being okay with their choice, right?
accepting your choice.
Knowing
Yeah.
knowing that you have a choice and knowing why you're making it. And that
That's really good. That's really good.
that is
Accepting
the
that
point.
choice and then also adjusting your goals accordingly. Because if you think that you want to be this high level athlete or you really have these grand goals, but yet you want to stay in the place where you rather yield 3% result, well, if you're not willing to change your actions and habits, then you best change your goal. And I usually never
Exactly.
tell people to lower their
Exactly.
goal and to shoot for the stars, but
Well,
you
it's
know, you gotta,
alignment. You got to be honest above
yeah,
all,
you
right?
gotta be honest.
In the end, you got to be honest. You
You
can
gotta be
shoot for
honest.
the stars and be unrealistic as long as you're willing to meet yourself where you are. Like, for example, for me,
Exactly.
I'll use myself as the example, right? So that we don't single, no one feels, I don't want anyone to, these are tough topics sometimes, right?
Yeah.
For me in jujitsu, right? Do I wish I could compete in podium every single time? Could I? Probably. I have the ability to do it. I just don't. Don't have the desire or anything except my ego telling me I should. Right. So I accept these tiny percentage points of growth when I'm capable of a world more. And it's because I have to be honest with myself. I am not the athlete anymore. That's not my role and it's not my goal, not right now.
Yeah.
I plan on returning to that in my 40s. We'll get there later. That's on podcast 800. Right. So I do plan on that one day, but I have to be very honest about something. And I train once to twice a month,
Yeah.
tops, just at home, not even at class, just here in the gym with
Yeah.
some blue belts, some black belts, some purples and browns, right? But that's not going to yield anywhere near the growth that would be required to podium every time I competed.
Exactly, exactly. I love
Right.
yeah, we're very open when it comes to sharing our own stuff. But, that's the way we are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
let's finish it out with kind of the newest ventures with ISO movements and what's coming down the pipeline. What's the best way for athletes to connect and work with you? Obviously, in the show notes, we'll put your Instagram handle, ISO movement, Instagram handle, the website. Um, if you want me to put like a link to any type of assessment, because I know that you're shifting some things. So you just let me know what kind of is new in your world that you'd like people to be most versed in, and then I'll make sure it's all in the show notes.
Totally. So that's a great exit point, Nat, because, and I'll start right with you, right? One of the coolest new things is for graduates of the ISO program, right? So I've opened up a cohort. It's a group cohort, private group for any individuals who have graduated through the ISO program and want to exist in a community of people who are willing to be that raw level of honest, um, and enjoy continuing to grow through their ISO principles without having to buy into one-on-one systems. So it's a bi-weekly group that meets, I'm sorry, yeah, it meets bi-weekly, right? Where I'm working out and leading the workout. So you get to work out with me. We get to upgrade any of your existing practices, of course, on a bi-weekly basis. The first meetup is body weight based. The second is tool based. So you'll see everything from clubs, ropes, kettlebells to foot fitness and myofascial release techniques to all sorts of different tool based learning. And these are all high level movers at this point, right? Because if you've graduated this program, doesn't matter if you're a pro athlete or 65 years old and getting over a hip replacement, you move well, right? And there's not many teachers out there that you're going to find that hold you to the highest standard of movement that you're capable of, right? You go to most fitness classes or training sessions, people are just pushing, right? Pushing effort instead of quality. So the first big new addition is the graduate level group. That one I just want to make sure Nat hears because that one's for her, right?
Yeah.
that is exactly where someone with a high drive, high competitive nature, high ideals for themselves, competing or performing actively, um, teaching, right, coaching already, it's a great place for you to be. The ways to get there are through either one-on-one education or group-based education. So this year, we're launching our first group educational cohort. So these are going to run on a yearly basis. It's a 12-month curriculum where we have all the nuts and bolts included, your assessments, your program, your homework, and it runs on a nice tight script for a full year. That will walk you into the option for the graduate group or a certification. You get both doors open.
Oh,
Right.
that's cool.
And that's the third edition, is the certification. We're going to have our first live certification event. So in person, where you fly in, we meet up, and we spend a 4-day weekend, and we ensure that you have all of the protocols and practices that you would need to be able to teach people what you are learning. So the grad group, more for the athlete to be able to keep their practice going. The certification, more for people that would like to teach. So it's those three things that are the new additions. The one-on-one programming just continued to get sharper and tighter. That is what's been running. That's the heart and soul of IsoMovementSystems and will be. The one-on-one programs are really focused around pain management. They are very select anymore in the ability to get in them. I believe there will only be a total of 20 slots to 25 slots a year to get in for the one-on-one work, as a lot of the time has to go to the groups now. So I can serve larger scales of people, right? Be able to make larger impacts, turn out some coaches that are looking through an ISO lens so that somebody like Nat could approach someone in her gym that might be laboring through movements and help them say, hey, look, I see what you're struggling with. And if you would like to cut the learning curve a little bit, here's a couple of ways you can do that. Right? For somebody that already works in fitness, in combat sports, in health, it could be a massage therapist, acupuncturist, chiropractor, doctor, right? All benefit from understanding deeper language, how to assess a body, how to approach somebody and provide the language that they might need to make their job a little bit easier, in turn, making your job easier, which is getting them to level up.
Yeah, I love that. So is the certification solely like it happens through that live event? Like there's no
Yep. So
line work? Okay.
correct. So you can get access to that certification event if you're in the grad group, automatic access, right? If you are going through the group cohort, you have the option in the beginning to get the certification event at a discounted price, or you always have the option to add it on at some point in your cohort. You're not forced into it, is the point.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Awesome.
But you can't just buy your way right into the cert event.
Okay. All right. Great. The good clarification.
Yep.
And do you have individual links to each of them, or where would you like people to be directed to all of the options?
Yep. So the website is beautifully laid out and explicit now.
Okay.
I have a lovely team working on all of that in the back end. So it's that simple. Once you get to my website, it's obvious steps 1, 2, and 3, depending on
Okay.
what you're interested in. The individual link that you're going to have is for the first group, is for the group cohorts, the ones that are about to roll out, because they're going to go into pre-sale now.
Okay.
And as soon as we hit, I believe it's a 12-person cap. As soon as we hit that 12-person cap, that first group is rolling.
Gotcha.
And my grad group affiliates, such as yourself, are going to have the first links, right, to allow people to sign up for those groups.
Okay.
Because I anticipate once I get them rolling, they're going to be filling up quickly. And as this continues to grow, right, Nat was nice enough to point out that everything is in the swing of growing right now. Nat and I met a long time ago, so she's kind of seen this all come up over time. Things are getting busy, right? My one-on-one work, as much as I love to, I would do it 20 hours a day if I could. but I can't, right? So everything is getting very, very select and low in supply. Um, so that's going to be a nice advantage if you can utilize or have Nat's name. It's a big advantage to running through the process because I know who you're coming from. I know what you're made of. I know what you're going to be seeking, and it makes both of our lives a lot easier.
Yeah, awesome. Super excited. Super excited.
Totally.
Hey guys, well, as always, if there was anything that you took away from this, which I'm sure there was plenty, or again, if it just really piqued your interest, it got your gears turning and you want to dive deeper into it, everything that you will need will be in the show notes. Obviously, make sure that you follow him also on Instagram because he posts amazing content also. So you can just get to know him a little bit too for those who just need to develop that relationship before kind of investing. I totally get it. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, but I'm telling you, he's the real deal, or I wouldn't have had him on twice of my podcasts. You know that integrity is a big thing for me. And so he's at this point the first person I've had twice on this podcast. So that says a lot and holds a lot of weight. So make sure you check everything out. You could tag us with any takeaways that you've had on social media at Body by Boss LLC. And you could tag Conor as well. And other than that, thanks so much for spending this time with us, sharing your knowledge and all the new offers and services that you are offering the world.
Totally, Nat. It is so, so, so fun to get to talk to you and everybody that's listening. Thank you guys so much for lending an ear. If you have any questions about any angle that Nat and I went into, please don't hesitate to reach out. Neither of us are shy. And you know, if anything we spoke about ruffled any feathers, please bring it up. It's supposed to, right? Remember, I went through all those ruffles. Nat has gone through those ruffles. It's not something this effective isn't easy or fun necessarily at first, right? It's tough, it's rocky, and until you stabilize, it can be a little, we'll call it rocky, right? We'll call it rocky. All right. So please explore, be willing to experiment and ask questions and be skeptical of what I'm saying, right? Because it's brand new. It's brand new, and there's a lot that you could be doing for yourself. Otherwise, right, Nat wouldn't have me here once, let alone multiple times, if it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right,
Awesome.
guys, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you
Thanks for
so
tuning in.
much, Nat.